Endorphin's Black Noir is a module inspired by some of the earliest drum machines. It is analog drum synthesis with digital effects and a high focus on performability. Your 7 sounds are bass drum, snare drum, tambourine, closed hat, open hat, metallic beat, and cymbal. The kick drum has a decay control and a tune control. The snare drum also has a decay control and a tune control. All the sounds other than the bass drum share the same 2 sound parameters, thrust and spoiler. Thrust sort of shifts the snare, tambourine, and hats from a noisy to a more tonal kind of sound. And it has the opposite effect, going from more tonal to noisy on the metallic beat and cymbals. And spoiler does this degrading, crunchy sort of thing. What they're calling flaps is resonance for all the voices, and that functions, of course, in conjunction with this big filter cutoff knob. So in the middle, that's clean. As you sweep it down, it will low pass it to silence. And if you sweep it up, it will high pass it to silence. And if you really crank the resonance, you can get a bit of self-oscillation in some of the tones. Up top here are volume controls for each of the channels, though the hats are grouped to one channel and the metallic beat and cymbal are grouped to another channel. And all the parameters I just showed you have a CV input, including the volume. That happens with the velocity input for each of the channels. Up top there are individual outs for each channel. That removes them from the main mix. The main mix is over here. There's a mono output as well as the stereo headphone output that I'm using right now. And over to the right here are the effects controls. So let's say everything except the kick drum to our effects. Now I'm going to start a sequence, turn up the effect amount. So you get 5 flavors of reverb, 2 delays, and a freeze effect. The bottom knob here labeled Cabin Fever controls 1 parameter of each effect at a time, and most of them, if you hold down this tap button, will give you a second parameter. So let's listen through each of the effects. Here's the next reverb. Third reverb. Reverb number 4. Reverb number 5, this is a spring reverb. And now we're into the first delay, which is a stereo delay. And here the tap button works as a tap tempo. And the next delay is like a tape delay. So as you turn the knob, you get these pitch shifting effects. Lastly is the freezer effect, where if you press tap, it grabs a chunk of audio. You can change the grain size here with the top knob. And you can change whether it's forward or reverse with the bottom knob. And also, as you approach that point where it's between forward and reverse, it actually also changes the grain size a little bit. So this is fun for some glitchy playing around. And as you can see, because I'm not sending the kick drum to the effect, it keeps playing while the others get frozen. I mentioned performability before, so I thought I'd talk about some of the features that seem to gear the Black Noir towards live performance. The fact that the thrust and spoiler controls, and I guess the filter as well, affect all the sounds. At first I felt that was a weakness because it would be great to tweak each of the individual sounds just a taste, but of course in a live situation, if you've got something going, having just one knob to change all the parameters across the board really lets you do a lot more at a time than trying to manage that if each of these parameters had individual knobs for each channel. Here's another trick. If you patch a clock to this clock input, then holding down a button creates rolls at the speed of that clock. There's also an auxiliary input, and it has this little input level knob up there. So that's something that could come in handy just as a bonus little mixing channel if you're in a smaller system. The auxiliary in is fed through the filter, but it doesn't go to the effects unless you hold down the type button, which causes all of the channels to go to the effects. So it's a bit of an all or nothing situation. Maybe something that they could change in a future firmware update to make that more flexible. Last couple things to cover. There is CV control over both of the effect knobs. There's also a mode where the level of voltage going to the cabin pressure will determine which effect is active rather than the amount of the selected effect. You switch to that mode by holding tap and type down until that light blinks red, and then you get out of it by doing the same thing until it blinks green. And then the last final tiny bonus feature is this little sample and hold output. So that's working in conjunction with the clock. Each clock pulse, it generates a random voltage. So you can use that for any of your random sample and hold needs around your system. Endorphin suggests patching it to the hi-hat velocity so you can get a little bit of randomly changing dynamics in your hi-hat pattern. And that's the Black Noir.